something's up. So after realizing that she was injured, they helped her into the car and they rushed her to the hospital. They told the officer that they did not know a knife. Officers seemed pretty suspicious of explaining the life as it already started raising a lot more questions than answers. Cool. I don't know, man. They got no shoes, no phone, no ID on it, no law. They was just walking out the sidewalk. Well, they were on the right track because officers got information on what actually happened. Yeah. So, this girl, the sister, was on the phone with the girl who was his partner. She was on the way back to Orlando. And she was on the phone with Molly. That girl over there. They were doing a TikTok with guns. That there was something. Molly, you're back to the That's right. Mariah was not picked up on the side of the road. Mariah or Molly or whatever. We will stick with Mariah from now on. Witnesses placed Mariah with Anaya when the shooting occurred. There was a little group together at the mobile apartments off the Hamilton Boulevard. Apparently, Mariah and Anaya were filming a TikTok video inside the bathroom of the apartment where a gun was used as a front. According to statements, Anaya filmed Mariah was trying to look like a badass in TKO style rifle. At some point, that rifle went off and struck Anaya in her torso. Anaya was taken to the hospital where we are now. Officers realized that Mariah knows a lot more than she. She was on the phone with Molly there, and they were doing a TikTok with guns. That's right. Mariah was not picked up on the side of the road. Mariah or Molly or whatever. We will stick with Mariah from now on. Witnesses placed Mariah with Anaya when the shooting occurred. There was a little bit together in the apartments off the Hamilton Boulevard. Apparently, Mariah was filming a TikTok inside the bathroom. The gun was used as a prop. A real gun with real bullets. According to statements, Anaya filmed while Mariah was trying to look like a badass with an AR-style rifle. At some point, that rifle went off and struck Anaya in her torso. Anaya was taken to the hospital where we are now. Officers realized that Mariah knows a lot more than she was telling. The stories are just not adding up. They decided to detain Mariah and Antonio until they figure out what's going on. Clayton. You also combined with Molly. Yeah. But you're also with stand up for well, I know you were there. Yeah, so turn around for seeing for your back. You were just being detained as a girl. Alright. So we're gonna figure it out, man. You're detained. I'm detained. You're detained. So I find out the truth. Figure out the truth. It's the truth. I'm more powerful than an accident. So if this one was, this one was. But until I find out the truth, because you wanted to give me a bullshit story at first, now I'm going to have to take it until I get the real story. So you can follow our chart. Yes.
Yeah. After I figured out what the truth was.
Officers again questioned Mariah to see if she would tell them more. She has already lied to them. Let's see if her lies continue. I would like to take a moment to thank all of you for watching today. Up to now, Couch Potential has not taken on any sponsorship. That being said, we appreciate the detectives out there that have gone above and beyond to support the channel. It really helps us continue and we are forever grateful. Our Patreon channel allows early access to all of our videos and podcasts. Also, there's limited content, expertise information there as well for our comic if you desire. Consider a 7-day trial over there to see what it's all about. Use QR code or click on the description to learn more. Okay, let's get back to it.
So, I know Gibson is the owner of the apartment. And he basically lived there. Over at No-Go Apartments. He didn't want Alright, so you be there all the time. Whatever. Okay. I know that you and Miss Womack were left there at the apartment together while Miss Gibson went to Orlando. I know that she called her sister, the owner of the apartment, Gibson, called her Womack's sister, right? And you were in the background saying it was an accident, it was an accident.
I never got this all the good. I never got it.
So, with all that being said, I need the truth. It was an accident, it's an accident. Okay? You're filming a TikTok, you're filming a TikTok, but we need to know the truth. Okay? So I'm gonna give you one opportunity to tell us the truth. If not, I'm gonna shut the door, you're gonna go downtown, and you're gonna get talked to by a detective, and then they're just gonna arrest you because you were there, and we know you were there. And you have some sort of involvement in your refusal to say it. Okay? So, be honest. That's it. I know he doesn't have much to do with it. I'm sure all you did was call him and ask for a ride. He pulled up when she was shot. So he was already there. Yeah. So let me ask you this. Why did you tell my partner here that you just found her walking down the sidewalk, hunched over, and then decided to give her a ride and she was completely straight? Let me ask you that. Why? Why you gonna oh, no. You're not arrested right now. But if you keep lying, you're gonna be arrested. Okay. And what happened? Just tell me what happened. It's not a big deal. If it's an accident, it's an accident. Alright, and I'm sure she was in agreement to film the TikTok with you. Like, you didn't hold her against her will to film this TikTok. I'm sure she was doing it with you. So what happened? You dropped the gun? Did it go off? Like, just give me the details. What happened? He said, you never held the gun? And so, like, was it just you two? Huh? Who else was there?
greatest receivers in the modern era. A 6-year stretch that will eclipse even the greatest receivers in NFL history.
My greatest hit was the greatest. You saw Antonio Brown. I love him. Why would you do Antonio Brown?
This is Niagara Falls. If you've never been there, tourists every single year. Underneath its overwhelming beauty lies a dark history that's honestly confusing. Imagine standing at the edge, the deafening roar of water swallowing every other sound, and this chilling your skin. Now take one step closer, deliberately. You can feel the pull of gravity, wanting to suck you in. Over the years, daredevils and thrill seekers chose to fight this relentless cascade. Not all live to tell the tale. These are their stories. There's always a few expressions. Let's start with the incredible story of Charles Stevens. Charles was not your average man. He was a 58-year-old gardener from Bristol, England, with a daring spirit that the normal routines of everyday life couldn't contain. Can you imagine leaving behind the comfort of your job to fly across the world and face one of the most powerful natural wonders on Earth? That's exactly what Charles decided to do. In the early 1900s, Niagara Falls had become a magnet for thrill seekers and daredevils looking to make a name for themselves. The challenge here was extremely dangerous but simple. Go over the falls in a barrel and survive. Yes, I did say barrel. I'm not really sure who came up with that idea in the first place, but somehow it became an almost normal stunt for people to try. Although it certainly didn't hurt. This stunt wasn't just for the adrenaline rush, but also for the fame and fortune of easily pulling it off abroad. The idea of barrel stunting involved making a specially designed barrel that could withstand the immense crushing force of the falls. These barrels, which often came in different sizes and shapes, were reinforced with materials like steel and wood, and sometimes even padded to protect the person inside. On July 11, 1920, Charles stood on the banks of the Niagara River with his custom-made barrel. It was an oak barrel reinforced with steel hoops, and inside it included an anvil weighing around 100 pounds at the bottom. The anvil was meant to keep the barrel upright as it fell over the falls, much like the way the ballast of a ship stabilizes its structure in rough waters. Just think about that for a moment. A heavy anvil inside the barrel with you as you go over a 167-foot drop. It takes a special kind of man to even think of attempting this. And Charles Stevens was that special man. As Charles climbed into the barrel, I imagine the roar of the falls was deafening, with the mist swirling like a warning. His heart must have been pounding, a mix of fear and excitement. Once the barrel was sealed, his assistants gave it a push, sending him on his way toward the edge. The barrel rocked and spun in the rushing water, pulled by the strong waves. It bounced up and down, twisting as if the river was trying to shake it apart. Each wave seemed to toss it higher, only to slam it back down again, splashing water everywhere. People watched it with wide eyes as the barrel drifted closer to the edge, its movements wild and unsteady. Then, with one last tilt, it tipped forward and slid over the edge, disappearing into the roaring falls below. Minutes passed, each one stretched into what felt like hours as the crowd waited, scanning the waters downstream. Where was the barrel? Where was Charles? The tension was unbearable. Finally, they spotted something. Pieces of the barrel began to surface in the turbulent water. At first, people thought maybe Charles had made it. Maybe he'd escaped somehow. But in the mess, they found something terrible. They saw a right arm still strapped to the harness, inside what was left of the barrel. It was a horrifying sight. The anvil meant to keep the barrel steady ended up working against it. The extra weight caused it to crash with so much force that it couldn't withstand the impact.
barrel had shattered on the rocks below, and Charles lost his life instantly. His bold attempt to conquer the falls had turned into a devastating tragedy. Charles Stevens was the first person to die trying to cross Niagara Falls in a barrel. His story reminded the barreling community of the incredible power of nature and the dangers of pushing limits. Even the most careful plans can go catastrophically wrong when forces far beyond human control face them. And this is just the beginning. The stories of those who followed him are just as daring and even more chilling. So, buckle up, because things are only getting more intense. Our next story takes place 10 years later on July 4th, 1930, and it's about a man named George Slipakis. Now, George was a 46-year-old Greek immigrant who settled in Buffalo, New York. George was a cool guy with big dreams, and an even bigger fascination with the mysteries of life. George had a deep interest in spirituality and the afterlife. He often thought about life's biggest questions, and he felt he had a lot to share with the world. He believed that by surviving a tip over Niagara Falls, he could gain the fame and fortune needed to publish his writings on spirituality and the afterlife. And he thought that a successful stunt like Niagara Falls alive would make him famous and give him a platform to share his ideas with the world. But George wasn't reckless. He spent a lot of time planning his journey. For this stunt, he designed a massive 2,000-pound oak barrel reinforced with steel to protect him from the fall's immense power. Inside, he included oxygen tanks and other supplies to sustain him through what could be a long and dangerous journey. The lid of the barrel was going to be sealed tightly, and not just for showmanship, but as a necessity. The powerful force of the Niagara Falls was enough to tear apart anything not securely closed. Also, if water entered the barrel, it could quickly sink. Sealing the lid was George's way of ensuring the barrel's integrity and his survival during the most dangerous part of the journey. Inside that dark, airtight space, George planned to rely on the oxygen tanks to sustain him while he waited to be retrieved. But he wasn't alone. In a touching decision, George brought along his pet turtle, Sonny Boy, a companion said to be over 150 years old. Taking him along showed George's belief in his plan. It was almost like them embarking on the journey together. When the time came, George climbed into the back of Sonny Boy. You can see his calm reaction as the lid is sealed, and he is set adrift toward the roaring cascade. He clearly believed he was going to make it out alive. As George inched closer to the waterfall, the sound of the water must have been so loud inside the barrel. With the world reduced to the muffled roar of the falls and the creaking of wood under pressure, George's heart must have raced as the barrel bobbed and swayed in the turbulent waters. Some people were probably on the banks, watching as the massive barrel tipped over the edge and vanished into the mist. For a moment, it seemed like everything was going as planned, but that illusion didn't last long. You see, before that day, George had been warned by Red Hill Sr., the local daredevil and expert on the falls, that the barrel's size and weight might work against him. At over 10 feet long and 5 feet in diameter, the barrel weighed nearly a ton, which was far heavier than most vessels used in similar successful stunts. Hill warned him that the barrel's massive size could cause it to become trapped in the unpredictable currents near the base of the falls. And unfortunately, that's exactly what happened on that fateful day of July 4th. Unlike Charles's attempt a decade earlier, George's barrel survived the fall and came out in one piece. But instead of floating downstream to safety, it got stuck in the strong currents behind the falls, spinning and rocking in a spot that was nearly impossible to reach. Inside the barrel, George must have been terrified. It was dark and cramped, and the constant roar of the falls outside would have been deafening. His oxygen supply was running out, and he probably wondered if anyone would find him in time. Then there was Sonny Boy, his pet turtle. George must have thought Sonny Boy would make it through with him. Being a turtle that could survive in water, Sonny Boy was likely better suited for the situation, but even he must have felt the chaos inside the barrel. Rescuers worked hard to reach the barrel, but its location was nearly impossible. The water was too strong, and their equipment couldn't handle the dangerous conditions. It took them over 20 hours to finally retrieve it, but by then George's oxygen had run out. When the barrel was finally opened, the outcome was devastating. George had passed away. It wasn't the fall that killed him. His planned oxygen tanks had only been designed to last for about 8 hours, but the barrel had remained in the water for over 22 hours before it was retrieved. So he suffocated inside. His oxygen supply depleted long before help arrived. In a cruel twist of fate, it was the very design he believed would protect his
That's so terrible.
the massive size and weight of the barrel and trapped him in inescapable prison. A story that makes you pause. As sad as it is, this tale does have a bit of a bright side to it. Miraculously, Sonny, George's pet turtle, survived completely unharmed. He even achieved some good fame after George's ill-fated adventure, made the news and even featured as the main character in kids' fiction books at the time. So, in a way, George's dream of being famous worked out. Of all the barrels to go over Niagara Falls, George's was the only one to become held behind by the falls. Today, that same barrel is on display in Niagara Falls, serving as a reminder of the risks and challenging nature and the cost of following your dreams. But George wasn't the only one to take that risk. On August 5th, 1951, another man, William Red Hill Jr., stood on the banks of the Niagara River with his own daring plan. Unlike George, Red wasn't looking for fame or fortune. His motivations were darker and far more personal. Red was the son of William Red Hill Sr., who I just said he warned George about his barrel design. He was a local legend and renowned Niagara daredevil. He notably warned George just a couple of decades earlier about the river's dangerous currents. And now his son was about to experience those dangers himself. Red Jr. grew up in the shadow of this remarkable legacy, often assisting his father in rescue missions, and even swimming the treacherous currents himself. He followed in his footsteps as a riverman too, and even performed a couple of stunts himself. But no matter what he did, Red Jr. couldn't match his father's fame. By the early 1950s, life had taken a hard turn for Red Jr. Financial troubles from poor investments, and a lack of steady work began to pile up. He even got into debt because of it. The pressure of carrying on his family's name also weighed heavily on him. The once strong Hill legacy was beginning to fade, and Red Jr. found himself desperate to revive it. Red's plan was simple on the surface, but incredibly dangerous. He would ride over the falls in a new contraption he built himself, something far from the safe barrels used by others before him. This device wasn't carefully planned or meticulously crafted. Instead, it was a thrown-together collection of materials that seemed more like a last-minute science project than a life-saving vessel. Red called it the Thing, which is a name that fits its crude, almost absurd appearance. Imagine a bundle of oversized inner tubes, lashed together loosely with canvas straps and covered in fishing nets. Sandbags were tossed in to add weight, but there was no rigid structure to keep everything secure. The inner tubes, meant to absorb the impact, bulged unevenly like a clumsy stack of oversized pool toys. The whole thing looked more like a floating scrap heap than something designed to